Heritage and Healing. And Adam Frankel is with us now. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me, Michelle.
So there's just so much history packed into the book, we just can't cover it all, but just the short version. Your grandparents on your mother's side met after the Holocaust at a camp for displaced people in Germany. They then emigrated to the United States, to New Haven, Connecticut. When you were growing up, how much did they talk to you and other family members about their experiences during the war?
By the time I came around, they were talking a fair amount about it. At least my grandfather was. I was hearing his stories about Dachau, which is the camp where he was at the end of the war. He spoke about it a lot by then. My grandmother spoke less about it. She was very traumatic experience, very hard for her to talk about. She didn't even talk to my grandfather about it much, but I got fragments from her about hiding in the walls while Nazis stuck bayonets into them, things like that. And even in those fragments, she would tear up sometimes talking about it.
But how was it, the leitmotif, in the sense of, how was it understood? Was it understood as like a great victory, like we triumphed over this, or was it understood as something shameful? Like I remember reading that there are times when, Holocaust survivors would cover the numbers on their wrists because they didn't want to talk about it. Do you remember like how it was seen when you were growing up?
Well, every family handles it differently, and our family handled different aspects of it differently. I mean, there were certain stories that were too horrible to mention that I would get only fragments of here and there. There were certain things, certain stories that we were very proud of. There were times that my grandfather saved his own life, saved his father's life multiple times in the camps, and we were very proud of that story.
And then you go on to write about your mother's depression and the effect that had on her life and on your life as well. Do you feel now that this was directly related to what your grandparents lived through? How do you explain that connection?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a direct line. It's not one-to-one, but it defies everything I know about my mom and her experience and her parents and their experience to think that they're totally unrelated. And, we now know more about intergenerational trauma than we've ever known. And thanks to the work of people like Rachel Yehuda at Mount Sinai, who's done research in the emerging science of epigenetics, we know that children of Holocaust survivors are 3 times as likely to display PTSD when confronted by a traumatic event as demographically similar Jews who are not children of survivors. And we know other ways in which trauma can be passed down. And part of it also depends on the kind of family life that survivors create in their own homes after the war. In other words, it depends not just on the severity or the kind of experience they had in the Holocaust, but the kind of parents they are and the kind of behaviors that they set as parents in those families. And so going back and trying to understand and unpack all of that, it helped me understand my mother's experience and my family's journey. As I say, it doesn't explain all of it, but it helps me make sense of our family story a little bit.
So then you went on to become a speechwriter for former President Barack Obama, first during his campaign for president, then during his first term in office. I mean, for somebody like you who kind of was immersed in politics growing up, I mean, it sounded like a job, the job of a lifetime. But, all this time, you were carrying this burden. Would it be fair to call it that?
Absolutely.
This secret?